As we approach the end of our Unappreciated Teachers Week, which is, if you've been focusing on the last week, or this past week, we've been focusing on teachers who we unappreciate, meaning don't do. It's also the end of the Teacher Appreciation Week in Flower Bluff, and we applaud the teachers in Flower Bluff, including my old teachers. I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. I'm proud of you for doing your best. But there ain't nothing best about when it happened. Remember months ago in the broadcast we told you about Tourettes midway teachers who were drunk on the job? Well, 3 months ago, there was a teacher that was drunk on the job in Iredell County. This was 3 months ago. She was arrested and fired. Take a look.
Well, a teacher in the Iredell Statesville school system brought a little bit more than books to class yesterday. Yeah, now she's facing a charge of possession of alcohol on a school campus after an officer found an empty wine bottle in her purse and a cup full of wine. Queen City News reporter Will Lewis is live in Mooresville by Shepherd Elementary, and Will, parents have to be just relieved that a quick-thinking administrator noticed something and stepped in.
Yeah, that's right, Morgan. They sure are. It was the principal here at Shepherd Elementary that was made aware the teacher smelled of alcohol. They immediately notified the school resource officer, and that's when they discovered a lot more. As parents waited in line for student pickup at Shepherd Elementary School, word was spreading.
For a teacher to be drunk, that's not a good thing.
According to a release from the Iredell Sheriff's Department, the principal learned 41-year-old Jessica Proctor smelled of alcohol. The principal then alerted the school resource officer, and the teacher was escorted to the office. Once in the office, the officer discovered an empty wine bottle in Proctor's purse, and an insulated cup was full of wine.
I think it's very disappointing, and our kids deserve better.
The news made some wonder.
Our daughter actually told us yesterday that she had a substitute.
Yeah, she did mention that something about, I think she had a substitute, but we didn't know.
Police say Proctor was removed from the school, and a spokesperson for the Iredell Statesville school system says Jessica Proctor served as a contracted teacher's assistant for 2 days at Shepherd Elementary. On the day in question, no child was left alone with the individual at any time.
I mean, I'm glad she got caught, because if she didn't get caught, then that would have been not good.
Now, Jessica Proctor is facing 2 misdemeanor charges, one for possession of alcohol on a school campus, and the other is for child neglect because that cup full of wine was in a place where a student could have drank it. Her next court date is March 9th. In Mooresville, Will Lewis, Queen City News.
Thank you, Will, for that.
Okay, here, you know what it's time for. You know what time it is. You've heard me say for several months on this broadcast. It's time for our common sense alert. Common sense alert. Common sense alert. Okay. Where do we begin here? Like we talked about, one superintendent sandwich truck we're going to talk about at Tulsa Midway. Now for this one. You don't bring alcohol on school grounds. That is the law. And you don't put it in front of a child. What if that child drank it? You know underage drinking. A lot of teens are arrested for drinking under 21. This is why the age of drinking is 21. A lot of times that this was years ago. Years ago, if you were 12 years old, you would have alcohol, and people under 12 would smoke dope. We need to teach our kids it's not cool to drink. I mean, think of the episode of King of the Hill. Bobby smoked cigarettes, Hank made him smoke them. You think that's proper punishment? No. cigarettes are bad for us. Smoking causes all kinds of things like cancer. I'll tell you something about cancer. Cancer's bad. Smoking's bad. If you smoke, you'll get cancer. Smoking's bad. And also, drinking's bad. You shouldn't drink on campus. If you do that, you're in jail and you're bad. Still bad. Don't be bad. By drinking in school, being in school grounds, that'd be bad. There's your common sense now. And even people who think it's nothing, it's never It's never now. There is your common sense right now. And that's the end of our Teacher Appreciation Week. So we appreciate all the teachers out there. You do a great job out there. Especially all school counselors. Coming up next, these 10-year-olds were found out about they're working at 10 years old. About them working at McDonald's under 10, which violates child labor laws. You'll hear what the Young Turks have to say, and see my reaction and see what happens. Then later on, this person has Tourette's syndrome, and he's going to share his story. Stay with this. Welcome back. Mr. Carmen's out sick today. My name's Mr. Mackey. I'm filling in for him. He asked me to talk to you about 10-year-olds at McDonald's. I'm just messing with y'all. You don't like my Mr. Mackey impression. But there ain't nothing funny about what's happening next. Yesterday, while I was on YouTube, I came across a news article from the Young Turks. Now, they talked about this. 10-year-olds. Let me ask you something. You may remember months ago in this broadcast, we focused on Children of the Harvest. We may take a second look on that on Tuesday. If you remember Children of the Harvest, you remember James Flores. He was the kid under 12 years old in most states. Sometimes in most states, if you're 12 years old, you're old enough to work in the fields. But if you're under 14, you can't work at a shop or store, but even then, only for limited hours. Agriculture is always the exception. Federal law, if you're 12 years old, you're old enough to work in the fields. Can you ever imagine someone working at a fast food restaurant under 10 years old? I certainly can't. I would never imagine doing that. Even if I did, if I saw a 10-year-old working there, I would want to notify the manager immediately. They told me to keep my mouth shut. I never want to keep my mouth shut. I report it to the state. Even if it meant me losing my job. Yeah, we'll show you that viral video of what happened when a former Buffalo Wild Wings employee got fired for snitching. We'll show you that a bit later. Take a look at this. Take a look.
Kentucky-based McDonald's franchises have been fined for violating child labor laws. Believe it or not, there are still some child labor laws in the country, and these three franchises managed to violate them, even though we're talking about Kentucky here. But it's precisely the slap on the wrist that these franchises received that honestly incentivizes them to continue exploiting workers, and in this case, children. So let's give you the details on what's been reported here. So Louisville-based Bauer Food LLC and Bell Restaurant Group 1 LLC, as well as Archways Richwood LLC of Walton, Kentucky, were assessed a total of $212,754 in civil penalties for the violations. Now, that might sound like a pretty hefty fine, right? It sounds like this is divvied up among 3 different McDonald's restaurants. But no. The 3 franchises operate a total of 62 McDonald's locations across Kentucky, Indiana, Maryland, and Ohio. So that's a lot of stores, and when you think about, you know, the profits they get as a result of exploiting workers, underpaying them, taking advantage of literal teenagers, and even kids in this case, as young as 10, well, let's actually compare the profits to what the fine is. Anyway, let's tell you what they did wrong, why they got fined in the first place. So apparently all 3 franchises employed a total of 305 children to work more than the legally permitted hours and perform tasks that are prohibited by law. Bauer Food LLC, for instance, had employed 24 minors under the age of 16 to work more than legally permitted hours, including 2 10-year-old children who were employed at a McDonald's in Louisville. Is this what we want in our country? 10-year-olds working at a fast food restaurant? Some kids didn't even get paid. That should be mentioned. So 2 children were employed but not paid. And were given responsibilities such as preparing and distributing food orders, cleaning the store, working at the drive-through window, and operating a register. Investigators also learned that one of the 2 children was allowed to operate a deep fryer, a prohibited task for workers under 16 years old. But I'm not even done. There's even more to get into here. But before I do, Jake.
Yeah. So I've got a 10-year-old. The idea of her operating a deep fryer is crazy. It's super dangerous. I would never, ever allow that, right? But why are 10-year-olds working at these places? Because people are desperate. Because wages are so ridiculously low, and people can't make a living. The federal minimum wage is $7.25. That's $15,000 a year. If you worked a whole year with no time off at all.
Jake, I have to bring this up.
Yeah.
There was a study that was just done looking at the homeless population in Los Angeles, and you want to know what they found out? 9% of the unhoused individuals in LA are working at fast food restaurants. 9%. That's a huge percentage of them.
Yeah. And so that's the working poor. They're trying to do what is right, but you just can't make enough money at these starvation wages, so they're homeless. Look, when I ran for office, there was somebody who was a volunteer for me, social worker, and had to live out of his car because the wages are too damn low, right? But no one in power is ever going to do anything about it. Instead, they're like, give me your 10-year-olds. Let's go. Let's put them to work. And guys, we're at full employment. That's why they're going to the kids. There's an easy fix to this. You know what it is? Pathway to citizenship. We can have a rational immigration system that says, hey, listen, you don't just get to come in here and break the law, etc. But there is a pathway. Hey, and the last proposal was, if you work for 14 years, that's like a lifetime. Then you finally make it so that you can get a green card, etc., and be on the path to citizenship. That's not enough. We need the workers anyway. So why wouldn't we just go to the people who are desperate and hungry and want to provide for their family and love this country and came here for hope and do it in the legal way?
We know why.
We know why, because they're brown and we don't want it. We've got the great replacement theory. We don't want white people replaced. So instead, we're going to replace them with freaking 10-year-olds and drive them into these dangerous work conditions.
Look, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of these policies are happening simultaneously. I think this is on purpose. This is my opinion. But you have women's reproductive rights taken away, which means that women are going to be forced to carry pregnancies to term and have children that they might not have the financial situation to actually provide for. There's that. You have the loosening of child labor laws. This is all happening simultaneously. And you have the, anti-China rhetoric. You have the, discussions about what's happening at the border. They don't want a pathway to citizenship. Of course they don't want that. And look, Republicans pretend like they have a big problem with undocumented immigrants in the country, but their donors don't. Their donors love exploiting that labor force.
And by the way, if they're illegal, it's easier to exploit them and pay them less money.
When you're legal, there are some rights in this country,
And so
right? Some protections.
So look, two things about that, because it's related to this story. There's this mythology they put out there. They go, look, we're against undocumented immigration because they're taking our jobs. But wait a minute, we're at record low unemployment. The economists call this at this point basically full employment. And in fact, the employers are complaining we don't have enough people to hire, right? And they're going to hire 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds, etc. So, wait, if we have open borders, as the Republicans say, oh my God, the caravans are coming and flowing over the borders, it's unbelievable, etc. And they were supposed to take our jobs, but apparently they didn't because we're at full employment. So it was a lie all along. Just don't make your kids go to work. Force the politicians to pass laws that allow us to get paid decent wages. That's actually the answer to all of this.
Just to give you some more details about one of the other franchises, so that was Bell Restaurant Group LLC. They were discovered to have employed 39 workers between the ages of 14 and 15 to work outside of and for more hours than the law permits. Some of these children worked more than the daily and weekly limits during school days and school weeks, and the employer even allowed 2 of them to work. This part really makes me enraged. Work during school hours, meaning these kids weren't going to school, they were working at this McDonald's instead. Okay. So Archways, Richwood LLC is another one, allowed 242 minors between the ages of 14 and 15 to work beyond the allowable hours, federal officials said in a prepared statement. And this keeps going on, guys. Like, this is, you want to know something crazy? I go on YouTube to see if there's any other news reporting on this. There were a few news reports, local news reports mostly. But what really stood out to me was how many other examples from previous years there were of McDonald's in particular violating these child labor laws. They keep doing it over and over again. And the reason why they keep doing it over and over again is because the punishment doesn't fit the crime. They are profiting off of this practice. They are profiting off of exploiting these kids. And so when you slap them with a fine, it's like, all right, cost-benefit analysis, we're going to keep violating because the profits outweigh the fine significantly.
100%. And by the way, you think the politicians don't know that? They know that. And they take money from the fast food industry, the National Restaurant Association. Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin famously went and collected checks right after they voted against a higher minimum wage. They went to that organization and said, give me the bribes. I mean, they did it right in front of everybody. It was the most amazing thing in the world. So that's why the government officials go, give them a tiny little fine. You give them a $200 million fine instead of a $200,000 fine, all of a sudden they're not going to be having kids anymore, right? But the politicians don't mind it either. Look, I'm going to read one thing from our YouTube member we have. It's both funny and tragic, and it gives you a good button to the story. Leon Russo wrote in, did the kids get a Happy Meal?
Jesus.
I mean, that's the age you get a Happy Meal. Instead, they're having to serve the Happy Meal so that their family can make ends meet. That's because we have a brutal system where we are getting so badly squeezed that huge percentages of countries working for starvation wages and having to have their kids go to work as well.
Go to work in some cases instead of school.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks.
Let me say this. As someone who works in Mickey D's, I am astounded by what I saw. In all this, and it's one of the few moments in 6 years, never, in all of the 6 years and over 600 episodes that I have ever been sick to my stomach, 10-year-olds working. What the hell is wrong with this society? Common sense alert. Pay them fines, slap on the wrist. It's not going to help. Shut them down. Suspend them. They'll learn eventually. Or throw them in jail for child labor violations. They'll learn. If you learn from your mistakes, you will learn to not ever do this again. Okay? Okay. And I gotta say, I gotta say this right now. If I saw a 10-year-old working on a grill, prohibited by law, at 10 years old, I would ask my supervisor, what the hell is going on? He told me to mind his own business. I'm going to say, no. Hell no. I'm going to march down to the GM, ask what's going on, and say to her, hey, say to that person, hey, you're violating the law. It's either him, you let him go, or I go. Because I'm not putting up with this crap. And if I were to own a restaurant, I would not hire anybody under 16. Under 16. If I hired a 10-year-old, I'd regret it. I learned my lesson while being shut down for 6 months or so. I learned my lesson. I damn well know. After 6 years doing this broadcast, I really want to rip out my head of the scrotum while plunging a toilet with my bare hand. I'd rather do that than I'd rather suck farts out of my brother-in-law's dog's ass. I mean, this story isn't just any type of story. It's a story that sits in a truck stop bathroom for one day until even mosquitoes won't even go near it. It's stories like this that make me regret ever talking about my time here, my time at Mickey D's. This story is like a never-ending loop that goes into your mouth, thus creating an endless cycle of eating your own crap whilst taking a shit and eventually puking at the same time. This story is just so stunning, and this story just makes me sick that nobody can even accept you offer with your soul. I'd rather look at Elephant while singing "Growing Up and Getting Old" from Luke Combs. I'd rather trap dog crap in a jar for 20 years. I'd rather go back to school than deal with this issue. I'd rather eat chicken wings that are picked up off the floor. I'd rather take a shit in a bucket and then have the janitor mop over the bucket. I'd rather press my face. I'd rather be in a wheelchair and get my ankle busted while holding a fishing pole to my dick. My dick! Oh, we got that. Up next, Tourette's syndrome, an issue that's been happening. It's always happening from cursing. Meet one guy from sports who has Tourette's syndrome. Stay with us. We all like to think we have some control over our lives, over what we do, say, think, or hear. The man you're about to meet didn't even know what he had until he looked it up. It's a story that would make any person with uncontrollable seizures find out just what this disorder, this syndrome is. Here's Rob Stafford.
Meeting a sports star. Kids across America dream of this moment.
Come on over here, guys. Come on over here.
But these children share more than a love of baseball with outfielder Jim Eisenreich. They share a common challenge. Because of how he handled a medical mystery that baffled him and his doctors for years, Jim Eisenreich represents hope to these kids. Hope that someday they too can achieve their dreams.
One of baseball's truly great gentlemen, Jim Eisenreich.
Jim's story isn't really about sports. It's about a man who was blessed with the talent to play, but seemed cursed by a condition that nearly killed his career. It began a long way from these sunny ball fields, in the snowy farm fields of St. Cloud, Minnesota. Jim Eisenreich grew up the third of 5 kids. The little lefty learned to love baseball while he was still in a high chair. He says he was a normal kid, except for some strange symptoms that no one could explain.
When did you first realize there was a problem?
I think in first grade. And what it was for me was a lot of eye blinking and some, like I always had a cold, an ongoing cold.
Eye blinking he couldn't control, and a cold that wouldn't go away soon led to behavior that baffled Jim's mother, Ann.
We always eat our supper together, and he couldn't sit quiet. He would stand up and jump and stuff like that, and so we knew something was wrong with him, that way.
Jim also had a tendency to sweat the small stuff, obsessively.
That was one of my things, was to wash my hands a lot. If I got any kind of dirt on my hands, I washed them and dried them off. And also, if I came along and saw any of the kitchen cabinets open, I'd always shut them.
At school, he felt shut out, jittery, uncomfortable in his own skin. He'd snort, make faces, and had a hard time paying attention. Teachers accused him of disrupting class. 16, 24, 32. He felt like a kid out of control.
I always had the feeling that the rest of the class had their eyes on me. I didn't want to be the center of attention, but I felt like I was.
One day your dad asked you, "What's wrong? Why are you doing this?" What did you say?
I broke down crying and I said, I can't help it. I don't know, And he said, well, we're going to try to get you some help.
When he was about 8, his parents took him to a nearby hospital for 4 days of medical and psychological tests. Was Jim physically sick, or was it something psychological? The Eisenreich family says doctors told them it was just nerves or hyperactivity making Jim so miserable. He'll grow out of it, they said. The problems waxed and waned, but he did not grow out of it. So the family tried to ignore the mysterious mannerisms. But of course the kids at school could not.
Were the kids cruel?
Some.
Did they call you names?
Well, they called me Snorky because I snorted. I was a mental retard. I was a lot of different things.
Snorky, retard, jiggly, twitchy. The names hurt. As he grew up, Jim felt people were staring, making him even more ill at ease with himself and others.
I had no self-esteem, no confidence. I had my own little world in sports.
Sports were the sole solace for Jim, the only arena where the painful problems seemed to vanish, and Jim could feel comfortable, confident. The kid who couldn't concentrate in class could keep his eye on a fastball. So he focused on getting to the next level. He played baseball in college, trying to push away the problems that plagued him off the field, but never fully trusting the doctors who had called it nerves or hyperactivity, and always worried, was this all in his mind? On a June day in 1980, Jim got a phone call that changed his life. The star from St. Cloud State had been drafted by his home team. After 2 years in the minors, the majors, and a chance to make a life for himself in the one place where he wasn't bothered by the bewildering symptoms.
In center field, Jim Eisenreich, Minnesota Twins.
But the dream soon turned dark. Just weeks into his first season, at a game in Boston, Jim began shaking uncontrollably and gulping for air. The press and the nearly 14,000 people in the stands saw Jim suffering what seemed to be a seizure or a breakdown. Many Fenway fans were brutal. Bleacher wolves said the press. Jim's former teammate, Mickey Hatcher, now a coach for the Dodgers, was there.
Being out in the outfield, I could hear some of the stuff that they were saying, and really it was like a guy getting ready to go into an epileptic fit.
Fenway Park, some of the people were described as vicious in what they said to you. Shake for me, Jim. Somebody called you a freak. Vicious.
I never heard that. I guess I was so scared and so embarrassed for myself that I just had to get out of there, and it wasn't because of the fans.
I want out.
Oh, definitely. I'm saying, please, Lord, help me. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me get out of here.
It was the worst he'd ever felt, more than any time before, out of control. The game went on without it. But he flew with the team on to the next game in Milwaukee, still anxious, twitching, and having a hard time controlling his breathing, and worried it was more serious than the Twins' doctors could guess.
The hair was pretty smooth. But I was pretty turbulent. It was probably the longest ride I ever had.
You get to Milwaukee, and you can't go into the game.
I had to go out for batting practice where there's no people in the stands, and I couldn't even walk out to the field.
Were you scared?
Terrified.
Of what?
I guess of dying. Passing out or whatever. I didn't feel like I had any control of myself, which I didn't.
Team doctors still didn't know what was wrong, but they didn't think it was a life-threatening illness. They gave Jim a sedative for what they described as rookie stage fright. Then they asked Mickey Hatcher to take Jim to the hospital. Hatcher feared it was more serious.
I really didn't think that he was going to be able to catch his breath. He was shaking so much he thought he was going to die. He actually told me that I think I'm going to die, Mick.
In the emergency room, Jim got more sedatives, but says nothing seemed to work. He stayed secluded from the public and the press. When the twins returned home to Minneapolis, a team trainer drove Jim right from the airport to the hospital and had him admitted to the psychiatric ward.
I knew something was physically wrong. I knew I wasn't crazy. I just knew there's something I couldn't control. And when I couldn't breathe, that's not something that I felt was psychological.
Was it all in his head, or was Jim really ill? Would doctors ever be able to figure out what was wrong?
The conclusion to Jim's story and the answer to those questions when we come back. Okay? So stay with us. Okay? Well, as you've seen, a guy named Jim is trying to search for answers about his problem. Remember, it all started when he was a kid. But could he find the answer to what was happening to him during the school years and during baseball? Or would he give up? Here, with the conclusion to our story, Rob Stafford.
It had been 15 years since the first time Jim Eisenreich was hospitalized for tests, but still no answers as to what exactly it was that continued to plague him. Now at 23, he spent 2 weeks in a Minneapolis psychiatric ward, and then nearly another year and a half as an outpatient, treated with sedatives, anticonvulsants, antidepressants.
I was a walking pharmacy, trying everything in the book for 2 days here and 2 days there. And if it didn't work, I tried something else, and I felt horrible.
He was in the team photos, but he was out of the game. Except for a couple of comeback attempts that left him so frustrated that at least once he walked off the field in tears.
As the saying goes, there's no crying in baseball. And here you are in front of all these people and you're breaking down.
Well, there's been a lot of crying in baseball. You know, I didn't like the feeling I had physically. I thought, here I am again, and it wasn't worth it. No, all the money in the world wasn't worth going through that.
Before he'd even played a full season in the majors, before he could make a name for himself, Jim had to retire from the game he'd loved since he was a boy. He moved back home with his parents. When he wasn't seeing doctors, Jim passed his time playing ball for the local tavern team. But the pain of not knowing what was wrong was unbearable.
Your brother told us that he remembers hearing you crying in the room next door after your retirement.
I was probably on my knees praying, Lord, what am I going to do? What do I do now? I've left the game I love. I want to be normal. That was my goal in life, was to be normal.
But how could he be? He didn't even know which diagnosis to believe. By then he says he'd had 10 to 15 different opinions since he first showed the strange symptoms as a boy.
I can't tell you what they all are, but some are pretty ridiculous. I had a negative birth experience. Whatever that meant.
A negative birth experience.
Yeah, that's totally ridiculous.
They wanted to put you into a tub of water and have you breathe through a snorkel and relive your birth?
I guess.
Baffled experts had also urged Jim to try hypnosis, meditation, and biofeedback, but still no one was sure what was the matter.
I don't know what biofeedback really is, but I know it. I came out of there thinking, how are they going to help me play baseball?
Desperate for answers, he saw a new doctor, one who was especially interested in the symptoms that had bothered Jim since he was a boy. Could excessive blinking and a seemingly permanent cold in a nervous kid have anything to do with the debilitating agony Jim was now experiencing as an adult? The answer was yes. Finally, after more than 15 years in the dark and more medical exams than Jim could count, the mystery was solved. Had you ever heard of Tourette's syndrome?
Never. and I thought they were saying tourist syndrome. Tourist syndrome, yeah. Because I traveled. That's what I thought they meant. Seriously.
What Jim has is Tourette's syndrome, an inherited neurological disorder. Scientists think it's linked to an imbalance of dopamine and possibly serotonin, two important chemicals in the brain. The result is that people with Tourette's, like Jim, have tics, gestures like excessive blinking, or sounds like snorting they can't control.
If the tic's going to come and happen, it's going to happen, no matter where you are or what you're doing. Something in your brain is telling some part of your body to move or to make a noise.
Jim's symptoms are very subtle today, unless you look closely. There are approximately 100,000 Americans diagnosed with full-blown Tourette syndrome. Tourette has been in the medical books for decades, but it's sometimes hard to diagnose because symptoms can vary over time. Experts estimate there are many more people living with milder symptoms unaware they have Tourette. But many with Tourette, like in this 1994 documentary, have symptoms much more debilitating than Jim's. To this day, there is no way to test people for Tourette, but it's not a life-threatening condition. Lowell Handler, author of a new book about his life with Tourette, says that many people with Tourette, like Jim, can be obsessive-compulsive and have difficulty paying attention. But Handler argues there's one myth that especially adds to the stigma of Tourette syndrome.
I think the biggest misconception about Tourette is people thinking that everybody who has it swears.
In fact, only about 10 to 15% of people with Tourette have that symptom. Jim does not. There is no cure yet for Tourette syndrome, but there are drugs that can help people live with the symptoms. And when Jim found the right drugs, he was ready to get back in the game.
A standing ovation at Royal Stadium for Eisenreich.
Nearly 6 years after he was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward, Jim made a triumphant return to the majors with the Kansas City Royals. Since then, he's played in 2 World Series for the Philadelphia Phillies and the Florida Marlins. Since his comeback, Jim's life outside the stadium has been on the upswing too. The man who says he didn't have his first date until he was 27 fell in love and got married. He and his wife Leanne have 3 children who show no signs of Tourette. But because Jim knows how valuable early diagnosis could have been for him, he and Leanne watch the kids closely for symptoms. And Jim now uses his sports star status to help other kids who have the disorder.
Did you feel like you were hopeless?
To soften the stigma and to create confidence, Jim meets dozens of times a year with kids and grown-ups with Tourette and their families.
The more you can accept it and believe that you will be successful, I guarantee it'll happen. I want to take it upon myself to create awareness for these kids and give them some kind of hope for the future. I'd rather see them have a good upbringing and a better chance at sooner success than what I had.
Do you look back on those days and want to say to people, you should have figured this out?
No. If you try to fight what the good Lord's plan is, you're going to have a tougher time, I think.
Today, Jim is less concerned about his life back then and more focused on the future for generations to come. Certainly knowledge about Tourette syndrome has become more widespread since Jim was a boy. And many think it's because of Jim.
Do you think you've made that difference?
I think I've helped.
Jim was traded last month. He's playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers now. And you can find out more about Tourette syndrome on our website. The address is www.dateline.msnbc.com.
What a great story about Tourette syndrome. But there's a famous YouTuber out there who has Tourette syndrome. It ain't no laughing matter. I'm talking about Tourette's guy. Now, who is the Tourette's guy? Well, I'm going to play you a clip. I'm going to play you a clip after the break so y'all can understand, and maybe then you'll understand, and then maybe then you'll know what Tourette syndrome is. It's not a laughing matter that gives you a bunch of subscribers and lots of views on YouTube. Stay with us. Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, Bob Saget! Bob Saget! That's feeling you? if it's familiar to you, we're talking about Tourette's syndrome. A syndrome that is diagnosed in every one of us. We're focusing on one person who had Tourette's syndrome when he was in baseball. But it's no laughing matter when it's on YouTube. If you never heard of Tourette's guy, let me play you a portion. Let me play you a clip from this. We'll play you this clip right here. If you know him, skip this segment and then wait till our viral break or to our next story. But if you're not familiar with this guy, I don't know his name. But he has Tourette's syndrome, and he's got a son. He doesn't have Tourette's syndrome, but he's the one that films. Let me play you a portion of the clip, of this clip right here. You get the picture here? If you saw that clip, you know what I'm talking about. Tourette's syndrome is not to make fun of. You're watching not to make fun of people who have Tourette's. If you're the one with Tourette's, you are who you are. Succeed. Dream big. Don't let people drag you down. Dream as big as you want. Doctor, lawyer, journalist, singer, songwriter. Dream as big as you want, and maybe one day you will shine. You are a star. With people with autism, you are a star. You are a star, period. You have nothing to be ashamed of, because you are a star. And I do believe in people who will shine. I really do. Well, let me tell y'all. I'll tell you this. We've never covered Tourette's syndrome in the 6 years of the broadcast until today, but let me say this. I would never make fun of people who have Tourette's syndrome. It's a very serious disorder. It's a very serious syndrome. Lots of people have it. You shouldn't be making fun of people who have Tourette's syndrome, calling them names. That is a form of bullying right there. That too is a form of bullying. Alright. You may remember on Throwback Thursday, we showed you some parents who were arrested for truancy. But what we have not done was showed you kids. We have not talked about kids who were arrested for not sending their kids to school. And that's what kind of upsets me. I showed this to you on Throwback Thursday on the GMB YouTube channel. Now, I'm going to show it to you again. I'm going to show you these two clips again.
A Willis High School student is learning a tough lesson about skipping school, but it's because she's having a tough time.
She is. Sherry Williams is live in Conroe with the story that the student is telling us. Sherry? Hey, Lynn and Greg, yeah, her name is Diane Tran. She says she loves school. She hates missing school, but the problem is she's exhausted. She misses a lot of days, so last night she spent the night here in the Montgomery County Jail after the judge threw her in there for excessive truancy. 17-year-old Diane Tran has a heavy load at Willis High.
Dual credit U.S. history, dual credit English literature, college algebra, Spanish literature, AP.
And she has a heavy load in life since her parents divorced and moved away, leaving her to help provide for a brother at Texas A&M and a little sister with relatives in Houston.
I always thought our family was happy. So they're just trying to make a living and Diane got caught in the middle of it.
After a judge warned her in April to stop missing so much school, Tran recently missed again. She works part-time at a wedding venue and full-time at a dry cleaner's.
And she goes from job to job. From school, she stays up till 7 o'clock in the morning doing her homework.
But the judge says the case is bigger than Tran.
People there, and if you let one of them run loose, what are you going to do with the rest of them? Let them go too? A little stay in the jail for one night is not death sentence.
We explained the particulars of Tran's situation to him.
So, Judge, do you think it's a case for a little bit of justice tempered with mercy?
Probably so, yes, ma'am.
Can anything be done to revoke this?
Yeah, it probably could.
Will you?
I haven't thought on that issue because it turns me really soft.
Kids are kids. And if they're kind of by themselves, then, help them. Don't harm them.
Now, frankly, our hearts go out to this 11th grade student, so we talked to that judge some more. He said he would think about Diane Tran's case just a little bit more. If he does not, then she will have a record, and that concerns her mightily. Reporting live from Montgomery County, Sherry Williams, KHOU 11 News.
All right, now here's the second clip.
New at 6 tonight, a Montgomery County judge started throwing the book at students who skipped school today, saying that they're causing all kinds of crime in the neighborhoods. So instead of giving out warnings, he started locking them up. Local 2 investigator Stephen Dean was the only reporter in that courtroom today, and he's joining us live with a story you'll see only on Local 2. Stephen?
Well, Dominique, the judge made an example out of a whole lot of teenagers and one mother today in this courtroom. He says when kids are skipping school, they're not home watching TV. They're breaking into houses, breaking into cars, using drugs. That's what he says. So today, more than a dozen of those kids came to court for their truancy. They expected a slap on the wrist, and that is not what they got. One by one, students came up to face the judge, and they got quite a shock. When the handcuffs went on, they left for a 3-day sentence in the Montgomery County Jail. Like 18-year-old Tony Aparicio, the judge said he'd gotten several breaks for his truancy, so today the breaks stopped.
It is the last straw when you send them to jail.
Montgomery County Precinct 4 Justice of the Peace James Metz called this whole courtroom full of school skippers and their parents to court today, ready to hold them in contempt. Most are like 17-year-old Jessica Cervantes with stacks of past truancy citations, ordered to stop skipping school the last time she came to court, but 11 more absences mean she's now an inmate of an adult lockup.
It's not what I want, but I feel I'm forced to that sometimes. That's what's going to happen to them if they continue with that lifestyle.
There were some happy endings, though, on several kids as they stepped forward and proved they had turned it all around since their other court dates. The judge told the applauding courtroom they turned it around, so you can too. The judge also threatened several parents with going to jail if they don't get their kids to go back to school. Only one mother actually went to jail today, and that's because she presented a forged document to the judge. It was a doctor's note. The judge said it was altered, so she went to jail along with her 14-year-old daughter. And 2 area school districts up here say that the judge's effort is actually boosting their attendance throughout this area. We're live in New Caney, Montgomery County. Stephen Dean, KPRC Local 2.
Good work.
Great work. Now, that was back Now that was back in before 2011. That was back 2011. That was during 2003. The 2003 era. Back in 2003, if your child skips school, not only would the parents be arrested, but the child could be arrested. Let me show you from 7 years ago when the Texas lawmakers decided to change the law.
Since 2003, not going to school, truancy, has been a crime in Texas, but today that all changed. A new state law no longer treats students who skip school as criminals, and Fox 4's Sean Rabb is in our Dallas newsroom with details on the change. Sean.
You know, Steve, many people argued that treating kids who played hooky a lot had excessive absences. They argued, well, that if they treated them like criminals, that's where the pipeline to prison began. Before today, a guilty plea could lead to time in the juvenile justice system. But with the Justice Department looking at how kids who skipped school were being treated in Dallas County, state lawmakers made sweeping changes to truancy laws. Students being hauled in handcuffs and forced to wear ankle monitors because of skipping school, now in the history books.
As we decriminalize it, it's no longer a crime.
Effective today, new truancy laws make it a civil, not criminal violation for a child to have up to 10 unexcused absences in a 6-month period.
We reduce the cost from $500 to $50 as it relates to court costs. We allow expunction of records. We tell the districts to kind of look at different alternatives.
Alternatives to quickly filing truancy cases on students. School districts now challenged to try and get to the root cause of the problem with each pupil.
Through conferences, through communication with the families, that's when you begin to learn what may be holding a student back, what challenges may be ahead.
While lawmakers decriminalize truancy for the students, parents will still be held criminally liable for their child not being in school.
But you have to change your focus from more punitive to more helping, more caring, more empathy, more outreach.
Once you have a situation where a kid is labeled a criminal, guess what ends up happening? They become a criminal. We should be able to find different ways in order to keep these kids in school without having to make them criminals.
Now, 4 categories of students cannot be filed on period if their absences are connected to their situation. That's pregnant students, homeless students, students in foster care, and students who are the primary wage earners for their families.
Sean, I'm curious, Andre Riley there, does he acknowledge this is going to maybe put a little more pressure on teachers and the school districts to kind of be a little more involved in these kids' lives?
They absolutely have to be more involved with the students' lives. It's going to require teachers and others in the district who will focus on truancy to kind of begin to really log those absences, approach a kid, and then the main thing that Andre talked about is the district's going to really become engaging with the parents. Right. Emails, phone calls, letters, saying, hey, let's have a conference about your child. Let's figure out what's going on at home, how we can help.
Okay, Sean Rabb in the Dallas Newsroom, thanks.
All right.
And like it's happened, like years ago. Ankle bracelets and jail time. Those probably were the ones. But 2015 it all changed, and into the family code. That is chapter 65 of the family code. Feel free to look it up at www.texasstatutes.capital.texas.gov. Click on the family code. Then you would click on chapter 65 of the family code. That's the truancy court. That's to where the House bill was. Page 30 of the bill is where it would all start if you were to look it up. I played one of these clips on the GMB YouTube channel. It was this one right here. I'm not going to play the whole thing because we're almost out of time here. I want to get to our viral break, but one of the comments on the video really got me outraged. This is from the ANCAP. Methods of giving truancy laws. This is the whole thing. I copied and pasted this on my G drive. I'm going to read you a portion. Methods of giving truancy laws. This mainly applies to U.S. public education since this is my home country. These methods of giving truancy laws are involved opposing the public school system since the place the students are required to go by default to abide truancy laws. Also, truancy laws in public school or institutional link because he was formed potentially indoctrinating students and indicate effectively need to force to people intended to place to receive indoctrination. Yes, there are other forms of education like private homeschooling. There's a civil disobedience, alternative schooling, tax evasion, educating people. All that goes on, but I've 3 months ago, but I commented saying that's a fact. But if you heard truancy laws and or heard the requirement to go to school law, what happens is juvenile delinquency would go up and attendance would go down. When kids don't go to school, they're not sitting and watching TV. They're hanging out with friends, playing video games, breaking. They're not sitting and watching TV, hanging out with them, playing video games. They're out there breaking into houses, committing crimes, doing drugs. That's what can happen. That's the first offense. That's truancy. That's what can happen. We'll be right back. Earlier in the broadcast, we showed you a video from the Young Turks about 10-year-olds working under the age of 16 at a McDonald's in Kentucky. One of those I mentioned about picking up wings off the floor, and that's discussed. That's a health violation. But this one we want to show you for our viral break today. Years ago, this man was fired for snitching. What happened? Well, they picked up wings off the floor and put them in the fryer. The manager probably told him, "Do not tell anyone." This guy went and told him, and what happened next would leave them speechless. Take a look. Leave the manager speechless. Take a look.
This is the manager of Wild Wings, Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm a former worker. They pick up wings off the floor and put them in the fryer. Mr. Wayne is firing me for telling on them. Am I right, Mr. Wayne?
Absolutely not.
I'm getting fired for telling on people for working here. I lost 3 days of work because I told that they were picking up wings off the floor.
We got no comment.
This is the manager right here. He's firing me because I told on people. Because I told that they were picking up wings off the floor.
Thomas, I want you to have a good day.
And I'm finna post the video up right now.
Hey, folks.
Hey, what?
Terminated. This team member has been terminated. We're calling the police right now.
For picking up wings off the floor. You guys were picking up wings off the floor. I told him on them. And now he's trying to send me.
Wow. Common sense alert. Thanks. Okay, common sense alert. You never ever pick up wings off the floor and put them in the fryer. No. If food is on the ground, there's dirt on it, you need to throw it away. What about the cost? Too bad. I work at a fast food restaurant. There's any shit that's in the ground, we throw it in the waste. May cost me money, but I don't want to get sick from eating wings off the ground. I mean, I go to a wing restaurant to eat wings. Good fried or baked wings, boneless or bone-in wings. I love wings. I don't want to see people pick up the wings and put them in the fryer. If I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings and the manager told me, "Hey, the wings off the floor, but put them in the fryer," I'm like, okay, but don't tell anyone. And I told my mother what happened, and I immediately get fired. Like this guy right here. He did the right thing by snitching. He should have quit. That's what he should have done. But in the end, he got fired, video was posted, we know what happened. Probably won't know. Coming up on Give Rick Saturday. Ricky Rodriguez from the Children of God. You will see her videotape and why it happened. A child lost. It's on Saturday. That wraps up Give Me a Break for Friday going to Saturday. We will see you again for Give Me a Break Saturday night. For everyone here at YouTube, stop bullying, speak up, concentration not strength, and have a good night.